I like to start off my seminars by talking about the don't hope rule. Today we're going to talk about how to solve problems with manufacturers in China. And when I say don't hope, what I mean is if at the end of this conference or at the end of this trade show you walk home and you leave and you're saying, I hope that supplier understood my quality, I hope that they respect my non-compete clause, I hope that they'll be a good supplier. If you have to hope in China, you've already lost because it's probably not going to go right. So nothing is easy in China, but everything is possible. It's not easy to set up a quality system that works. It's not easy to set up a program to protect your intellectual property, but it can be done. So I'm going to give you the tips today so that you don't have to hope that things work out. You'll be able to say, yes, my supplier understands my quality specs. Yes, I have a good non-disclosure agreement in place. Okay. Now, I promise I won't give a sales pitch. I hate it when I go to a conference and the person stands up there saying, hire me, hire me. I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to give you a lot of free information behind the scenes. But just as a background on why I was asked to present, I moved to Asia in 1993 as an exchange student. I thought I was going to come for 1 or 2 semesters. A wife, 2 children, and 200 employees later, I'm still based in mainland China. So I started a company out of my apartment in Shenzhen 16 years ago, and now we service customers in the following supply chains. So you've heard of virtual offices. I set up virtual factories. So my customers want an office or a factory in China, but they don't want to set it up on their own. They don't want to set up what's called a woofie. So long story short, if you want to know more, our website, PSSChina.com, and we'd be happy to help. Okay. I was asked to talk about some of the general trends. And if I look at how has China sourcing changed from 10 years ago to the present, here are some of the big changes. And if you're not aware of these changes, the strategies that you're using for dealing with suppliers might not be up to date and accurate. So the new normal in business to manufacture, what I mean by this is that even as recently as 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I would often meet manufacturers and they weren't in business to manufacture. Back then, labor was less expensive. It was pretty easy to set up a factory in China. Minimum wage was much lower than it is now. So many of the manufacturers that I was dealing with, after I had a few beers with them, I would say, what's your 5-year plan? And their 5-year plan was to move from Zhejiang, buy some real estate in Hong Kong or Shenzhen and get out of the manufacturing business. They were in manufacturing temporarily. Now, after the global financial crisis, the rising of the RMB, more competitive, most of the manufacturers that you'll meet are real manufacturers. When you ask, what do you want to do 5 years from now? They say, we want to be the best socks manufacturer in China. We want to make the best flip-flops. So the benefit of the internet, of so much competition, is that the survivors, the factories have survived and they tend to be more professional nowadays. Also, China, it's been 16 years since China joined the World Trade Organization. Contracts are finally meaning something. When China joined the WTO, they were committed to transparency and openness of the legal system. So 10, 15 years ago, I never heard of foreign companies winning against Chinese companies in a Chinese court of law. I've been involved in 9 cases, and we are victorious in 8, and we settled on the 9th one as a foreigner against Chinese companies. So anybody that says, oh, you shouldn't register your intellectual property, don't take that supplier to court because you'll never win, it's not true. It's much more of a level playing field. The term Guanxi, you hear it, and it can mean different things for different people, but Guanxi today can be dangerous for you as a buyer. The old way of doing business in China was, okay, this supplier has a special relationship to get me better pricing on raw materials, or someone's cousin works at the port authority and we can get a discount when we ship out freight. That's the old way of doing business. That's the old China. Now it can actually be dangerous for you, because if you put too much emphasis on that, under the table relationship and the person changes, you have to start all over again. To give you an example, you can't just set up use Guanxi and pay a hongbao, some funny money under the table, to a government official, and then if that government official doesn't do what you wanted them to do for you, like give you a discount on taxes or something, you can't take them to court and say, hey, you broke our agreement. So be very careful about doing these under-the-table deals. That's the old China, not today's China. The other big change is that now as China rebalances its economy, before it was very export-oriented, and now the domestic market is very important now. In the old days, just, I'm a Hong Kong buyer, or I'm a foreigner. You go to the factory, oh, it's so excited to have a foreign buyer here. Let's talk about orders. Now, as buyers, we have to convince the suppliers why it would be good for them to do business with us, especially if your orders are small. So in the past, just showing up at a trade show was enough. Now we need to explain to the suppliers, yes, I can help bring you some new designs or new technology, or we can open markets together. So we have to be a bit of a salesman to capture the attention of the manufacturers. So that's totally different than before. This is kind of the biggest trend, old headaches, new locations. As places like Zhejiang, Guangdong, along the coast, Fujian get more expensive, many of the manufacturers here are picking up their factories and moving to the inland, to places like Chongqing and Hunan and Anhui. It's like going back in time 10 years ago. So my suppliers in Guangdong province, they were lots of headaches 10 years ago in terms of poor quality, missed lead times, but they got it together and everything's okay. Now they're picking up their factory and moving to the inland, training new staff, new logistics issues. It's far away, hard to hire professional managers. I'm having the same headaches over and over again, so just at a new location. So when you hear about factories moving inland, maybe you're going to get a better price, but there's going to be a whole nother set of headaches, especially with quality control. Okay, so that's my 2-minute overview of how the sourcing game has changed. I was asked to give some tips for walking around the trade show, especially if you're a new buyer or it's your first time coming here. Don't be the person that walks up to the exhibitor and says, "What's your price?" As soon as you say that, the seller assumes that you only care about price and you don't really care about quality or lead time. And what happens is the seller will often change their quality level to meet your target price. So be very careful when you give the price. It's much better to introduce yourself, explain why you'd be a good customer, learn about that supplier, and then when you're comfortable, say, all right, here are my quality standards, let's talk about price. So whether you're sourcing online or at the trade show, don't focus on price. Have your expectations managed about minimum order quantities and samples. Maybe you're a big buyer from overseas and you're used to the suppliers giving you free samples and being very flexible with minimum order quantity. At a trade show like this, some of the suppliers might give out free samples, others don't. Don't take it personally if they don't recognize your company and say, oh, Walmart, here's 10 free samples. What I like to do is say to the supplier, okay, I'm serious about doing business with you. I'm willing to pay you for the samples, but if I place an order later, will you give me a discount? Basically replace the value of the samples. And in most cases, the suppliers are willing to do that. In terms of minimum order quantity, if you're a small buyer, it can be tough. So if the factory says, sorry, our minimum order quantity is this, realize that's just a negotiation. The minimum order quantity is at this level based on this price. But if you were willing to pay more per unit, that minimum order quantity can be flexible. And especially in fashion and textiles, you really want to ask, why is that minimum order quantity what it is? The supplier might be thinking, all right, the minimum order quantity is 1,000 units. But really, that's 1,000 units per type of raw material. Maybe they have to get black cotton or whatever. So you might be able to get some flexibility with the minimum order quantity if you say, all right, I'll buy these different styles using one raw material, so it reduces your minimum order quantity to your sub-supplier. We already talked about the need to sell the seller. Okay, I was asked to talk about scams today, but these are tips not just for scams, but also for avoiding problems with your suppliers. And at the end of the day, at a trade show like this, the exhibitors, they've paid a lot of money to be here. They had to organize their passports and visas and hotels, not to mention the cost of the booth. So it's highly unlikely that you're going to walk around here and find scam artists. You go online, do a Google search, and start looking for suppliers, you are definitely going to encounter scams. And by scam, I mean a company that makes themselves look like a factory, makes themselves look professional online, but in reality, they're going to disappear with your orders, with your deposits. Also, there's issues where suppliers are new, buyers are new, and there'll be some confusion, and maybe the seller didn't set out to scam you, but you made some mistakes like not using a purchase order or failing to confirm your quality, and you have problems later. So I'm going to talk about how to avoid scams and also how to position your relationship with the supplier so that it will have a more positive outcome. Okay, you're going to have problems if you fall into these categories. If you're an e-buyer, meaning you think you can maybe come to a trade show, meet a supplier, and then do all of your communications online, never going to the factory, never doing due diligence, that can be very, very dangerous. Also, if your orders are small, especially if they're products that are small size and high value, earrings, watches, some electronic devices. The reason that the scam artists target those products is because they're usually shipped via express packages. And there are so many express packages that come in and out of the Chinese border and overseas that the customs officers don't bother to open up and check what it is. When a 40-foot container goes through, usually there's somebody that eyeballs it to confirm what's inside. But if the product is very small and fits into a FedEx pack, it's unlikely that it's going to be open. That means the scam artist can send you a box of rocks when you thought that you were getting a box of $10,000 worth of earrings, for example. Okay, we probably don't need to discuss it here, but most of the buyers in the audience now are probably professional enough to realize that you can't buy Guanxi and famous brands online and expect them to be real. It's a common scam where someone online, hopefully not at this trade show, but someone online might say, hey, my cousin works at the Nike factory, and I can get you 1,000 pairs of the latest Nike shoes out the back door of the factory. It doesn't happen. These major brands control the factory so tightly that they know exactly what raw materials are being converted into finished products. So it's almost always going to be a counterfeit good. So be very careful. These deals just do not exist. Okay, things to remember. Just because it's made in China doesn't mean it's available in China. We talked about the Nike shoe, for example, or some famous handbags. Yeah, they might be made in China, but that doesn't. The factory doesn't necessarily have the ability or the willingness or there's no okay from headquarters, the brand owner, to sell that in China. So just because it's made here doesn't mean that it's available for you and I to purchase. Also, you might be surprised that some fashion accessories cost less overseas than in China. I'm always surprised when I go home and a nice suit of a famous brand is less expensive in America than it is in China or sometimes even Hong Kong. The reason is that in China, the VAT structure is positioned so that there's more consumption tax, and the same product, even though it's made in China, might be more expensive at a retail or wholesale level in China. So don't just assume because it's made here that it's going to be cheaper. Also, there's no safety net. If there's no Better Business Bureau in China, the police aren't really going to help you unless you've lost a lot of money. And it's highly unlikely, depending on which country you're from, that your embassy is going to help fight for you to try to get money back from a bad supplier or a scam artist. So know that as buyers, we're pretty much on our own when we go out there and start sourcing. Now some good news. It is very easy to avoid scams. So these tips will help you avoid 99.9% of the scams out there, as well as help you build a more positive relationship with your supplier. If that supplier is legitimate, I mean. Okay, don't focus only on price. Don't be seduced by the siren song of low price. What will happen is you're visiting potential suppliers. Maybe one doesn't have the greatest quality, but they give you this low price. You will subconsciously want to gravitate towards them and say, okay, maybe they didn't get the quality right the first time, but if I work with them a lot and maybe I go to the factory and I train them, I can help make them a great supplier. It really doesn't happen like that. if you roll up your sleeves and work a lot with a supplier, you can make a bad one good, you can make a good one great, but it's really hard to make a bad supplier a great supplier just by being an active buyer. So if the price is too low, there usually is a reason for it. I hear small order buyers, so maybe some people in the audience have small orders, a couple thousand US dollars, and you might be saying, well, I don't have time to do quality control, or I don't want to spend money to get a visa and a car and a hotel and go to China to visit the factory. I'm just going to take a gamble. If you're saying that, realize that you would probably save money by just going to Macau and gambling rather than going online and trying to find a supplier and placing an order without doing any due diligence. So if you're going to gamble, don't do it in the sourcing game. Go to Macau or Las Vegas, better odds. It doesn't cost you any money to ask for references. I don't know why every buyer doesn't do this. If you have a supplier, a potential supplier, Mr. Supplier, show me a couple references. And Mr. Wong will say, oh, I'm sorry, Mike, we don't give out our references. Okay, Mr. Wong, I'm in America. Give me an Australian customer. Give me a Canadian customer. Give me a Mexican customer. I don't care. I just want to talk to one customer. If the factory or the supplier can't give you one reference, that's a really bad sign. Payments to performance. What I mean by this is, if your orders are medium size or smaller, you're probably going to have to give some kind of deposit up front. And then there'll be a second payment or perhaps a final payment when the goods ship out. Well, you're crazy just to say, all right, here's the money, ship it. What you want to do is have something more professional, like, Mr. Supplier, here's your deposit, 30 days, I'm going to come back later before the products ship out, and I'm going to do an inspection, or my third-party representative is going to come in and do an inspection. After that inspection passes, then here's your next payment. So you use the carrot and stick approach to link the payments to the project gates or the performance of the supplier. Who are you paying? You would not believe how many buyers make this mistake. You have a supplier in mainland China. That supplier has a trading company or a sister company in Hong Kong. You have a contract, place a purchase order to the Chinese factory. Yet they say, okay, just send money to our Hong Kong account. It's easier for us to deal in multiple currencies, and we don't have to the hassle of making it into RMB, so just send it to our company's Hong Kong account. It's not malicious, they're not trying to trick you, but if you send money to the Hong Kong company and you have a purchase order with the China-based mainland China factory, if something goes wrong and you need to go to court, this is what will happen. The judge will say, okay, Mike, you said that the supplier in China cheated you. And the supplier in China will say, yeah, we received a purchase order from Mike, but we have no record in our corporate accounts of any money. What? But you told me to send to Mr. Lee in Hong Kong. Okay, then Mr. Lee gets dragged into court, and Mr. Lee says, yeah, the strangest thing, $10,000 arrived in my account from the US, but we don't have any purchase order, there's no documentation, we don't know where it came from. So if you want to protect yourself, you need to make sure that your contract is with the company that you think you're doing business with, and that company name is on the corporate account. Be careful, don't send money to personal accounts, you'll have the same problem. So make sure that if you're dealing with a factory direct, make sure that the name on the business license is the same as the name on the contract that you have with them, and is the same name that's found on the bank account. If you do those three things, you're going to save yourself a lot of headache. Okay. As I mentioned before, there's no Better Business Bureau in China. If you find a good supplier, keep that supplier to yourself. But if a supplier does you wrong, or you want to find out which suppliers have a bad reputation, I visit this website every morning, supplierblacklist.com. It's a network of buyers exposing bad suppliers and sharing their stories. Okay, verify the verifications. It's so easy to Photoshop a Global Sources certified verified supplier and take that logo, cut it off of Global Sources, and stick it on a homepage for some fake factory. So just because you found a factory online, I'm not talking about the trade show factories, I'm talking about if you're online and you find a factory and they say, we're verified by Global Sources. Okay, ask Global Sources if that's really true. We're ISO compliant. Okay, ask ISO if this factory is really ISO compliant. So verify the verifications. And as I repeat over and over again, one way that you can source safely is when you go around to the trade show, ask the exhibitors, how many years have you been coming to this show? How many years have you been a member of Global Sources? Because that costs money. And in theory, if they've been around for a long time, they will be around for a long time as well. So when you meet there's people walking around the trade show here that they don't have a booth. They just have a brochure and they're, hey, you want to buy watches? You want to buy shoes? Okay, where's your booth? Well, we don't have a booth. Well, all right, that's a red flag to me. If you're serious about about dealing with foreign buyers, you ought to pay to have a booth here. So, and then the suppliers that do have a booth, okay, is it your first time at the trade show? Have you been here for many years? How much do you pay Global Sources for the advertising spend and such? And I like dealing with suppliers that have a bit of history. Okay, so that's how to avoid scams and how to set up a good relationship with your supplier. Let's talk about project management. Now, this is not China's strong point. China, often the factories might have great quality, excellent pricing, but I've dealt with suppliers that have thousands of employees, and I ask them, hey, show me your project management software. No software. Okay, how do you manage projects? Oh, via email. Really? My company only has 200 employees, and 100 of those employees have a seat on our software system so that we can manage the flow of information. Who is doing what, when, and why? Okay, maybe the supplier and maybe you don't have to spend money on a software system, but you better have at least a spreadsheet that confirms who is doing what, when, and why. Because if you don't, what will happen is the 11th hour, you think the product is going to ship tomorrow, and then Mr. Wang says, oh, I'm sorry, Mike, our raw materials had a problem, and we're not going to ship out tomorrow as planned. Why didn't you tell me? Many times the suppliers are worried that you're going to cancel the order, so they don't give you any bad news. They try to fix it on their own, and then it's too late, and you miss lead times. So what I like to do is establish trust and set up a system for managing the project. The way to establish trust is to meet the suppliers in person, not just at the trade show, but go visit the factory. Show them your 5-year plan as a company, how you two can grow together. Make sure your interests are aligned. Maybe you're a small buyer from a new market. You're in New Zealand, and it's not that big of a market, but you've got some great designs, and the supplier doesn't have a representative in Australia or New Zealand, so you can work together. Everybody wins. Your orders aren't as big as Walmart, but you bring something to the supplier's table. So that's a way to establish trust and have the interests aligned. Now let's talk about systems. Sadly, if you don't ask for an update, you probably won't get it. So what I like to do is sit down with my suppliers and say, all right, we're going to meet every day at Wednesday, 3 o'clock on Skype, QQ, WeChat, whatever. But I want you to be available for me for half an hour every Wednesday, 3 o'clock China time. It might be just to say, hello, everything's going great, Happy New Year, see you later. Or it will be an opportunity to review the open project list and sort things out. So my suppliers get in the habit of always being available for me at a certain time. Maybe we don't really need to meet that day, but I want the opportunity to discuss problems and keep an eye on what is actually happening. So I use a software called ACE Project Management. It's bilingual, it's out of Canada. But if you don't have proper software, at least have a spreadsheet that covers these items. And I put them in Chinese as well so that you can cut and paste and share with your suppliers. It's a little bit hard to see. So we've got things like the task, what's the status, who is responsible, buyer comments, supplier comments, obvious stuff. How would you manage a project if you didn't have this? So a simple spreadsheet works. Leave your business card and I'll send you all these slides so you can cut and paste. No problem. Okay, so that's general project management. But let's dial down a little bit and talk about quality management, quality systems. How to find a factory that has good quality, and then how to work with them to ensure that the quality level you want is what ships out. First question, and if you're not asking this, you're really doing yourself a disservice. These factories out there, ask them, show me your quality manual. And two things will happen. The factory will say, thanks for asking. Here's our ISO quality manual. Check it out. If they're a real manufacturer that understands quality, they'll be excited to show you their documentation. Hopefully that's what happened. The other thing that they will say is, We've been making flip-flops. We've been making watches for 10 years. We don't need a written quality manual. We know what we're doing. Okay, well, what if you have a flood and need to move? What if the government rezones your factory as residential and you need to move? What if your two best engineers decide they want to start their own company and leave you? What happens after Chinese New Year when your employees decide to stay home in Hunan and not come to Dongguan? That happens. Overnight, a factory's situation can change. If they don't have a written manual that describes to their staff how to make a given product, it's very dangerous to do business with them. Now, if you want to see what a quality manual looks like, you can visit the About Us section on our website, and it's about 20 pages long, but I'll show you the quality manuals that we use at our company. So everything's out there available. There's no excuse for not understanding what quality documentation should look like. Okay, traceability. This is an issue for maybe higher end quality where, God forbid, there's some defect in the product and you needed to isolate. Do I have to have a recall? Say you're making clothing for children and all of a sudden you found out that pajamas that you ordered are not fire retardant, and now the Canadian government is saying you have to recall all of these products. You know, that might put you out of business. So a professional factory will have some traceability, meaning they'll be able to tell you, yes, the raw material that were used in those pajamas were from this supplier, and 10,000 units that shipped on July 6th use that material. And when you visit these factories, you will see that it's not just stock laying around, but there are barcodes and things are packaged and well marked. So in theory, you should be able to walk through a factory and say, pick up any in-process product, not even finished goods, not raw materials, but in process, and say, okay, tell me a little bit about who worked on this. Where do the raw materials come from? What does the pass fail? And a professional factory, especially if they're ISO compliant, will say, here's the information about this batch. So that's traceability. Don't get me wrong, some factories are a pleasure to deal with. We make lots of money together. So I'm not here to say, oh, all factories from India and China are problems. That's not the case. Many of them are great. But what separates the good from the great ones are the following couple things. One, they don't have an attitude. You see a lot of factories in China will say, our goal is X defects per 100,000 or whatever. And okay, they work really hard to meet that goal, but in the quality game, the goal is always advancing. If you can get 0 out of 1,000, well, why not 0 out of 10,000 defects or 0 out of 1,000,000? So a factory that hasn't changed its QC goal in a long time is a lazy factory. So you want to work with factories that have a living goal that's always changing in terms of quality. Also, especially if you're dealing with smaller factories, if the QC director reports to the production manager, that's a problem. Because at some point, there'll be a rush order, and the production manager and the accounting team, they know that they're going to get paid when the product ships. So they'll say to the quality manager, all right, we know there's some defects, but we need to ship it, get the money from the customer, and we'll sort out the defects later. In a smaller factory, it's much better if the QC director and the production director report to the general manager or to the owner, rather than owner, production manager, QC director, in that kind of hierarchy. Okay, I've talked about ISO already. So some of you mentioned that you have ideas that you want to protect, intellectual property. In the fashion industry, you might have a new brand, or a new design. And it's hard to protect a new design because it's not something that you can register as intellectual property. Maybe if you have a new material that you've invented, or something that is totally novel and new, then maybe you can register your intellectual property. So if it is something that you can legally protect, remember that China is a first to register rather than first to market system. This is really important because it's not about who had the idea first, it's about who registered it first in China. So you might have this great new technology, you share it with a supplier, maybe you don't place as many orders as they wanted, and so that supplier takes your logo, your intellectual property, goes to Beijing, spends a couple thousand RMB, and now they own it because they registered before you. So if you're at all serious about protecting your intellectual property, know that it's not expensive and it's very quick to get your IP registered in China. And I'll give some references later about how you can do it. Okay, here are some ways that if you can't rely on the intellectual property system, you don't have a patent, you don't have a design patent or a trademark, how else can you protect yourself? Well, first, when you're walking around the trade show, let's say that you're buying watches, and this is your watch, and you've got some special technology or a special idea on the band. Well, you're going to walk around and probably visit 10 watch manufacturers, and you're going to show them your specs, and you're going to show them your sample, maybe even give them a sample, and then you're going to pick one out of those 10 suppliers to do business with. Well, now the other 9 suppliers saw your secrets. So what I like to do, if I have a proprietary design, is I will bring a counter sample that's similar to what I want to buy, similar material, similar technology, and I work with those potential suppliers to get the quotation, and then I narrow it down to maybe the top 1 or 2 and show them the secret sauce. So don't just walk around with the ideas that you've created and hand them out to people that you met for the first time at a trade show, regardless if they're Chinese, American, or wherever. Okay. Now that you've selected that supplier and you've got your unique idea, maybe it's a design, something like that, you need to ask some key questions. For example, who has access to the idea? Maybe you were smart and you signed some non-disclosure, non-compete, non-use agreement with a supplier, but if that supplier is actually a trading company and behind the scenes there's 4 or 5 manufacturers that are going to see your idea, how in the world are you going to track if they're respecting your intellectual property and not knocking you off? So if you have your own ideas that you're trying to protect, you really need to know who sees those ideas. One way that you can protect things is called black box manufacturing, and this is the line of work that I'm in. You basically take components from different suppliers, and then the secret sauce is added at a trusted partners facility in China so that the sub-suppliers are kept at arm's length. That's black box manufacturing. So it is possible to get that China labor rate without showing your secrets to everybody. Okay, if your orders are small, but a giant manufacturer is really excited about doing business with you, it might be because they're using you as the R&D department and they want to use your ideas and sell them elsewhere. So it's always good to have a balance between your size and the supplier size. Maybe you're a giant buyer, okay, deal with a giant factory. But if you're a small buyer, less than $10,000 per year, and this mega factory with 3,000 employees is really excited to work on your order, it might be because they have an agenda behind the scenes and want access to your ideas where they're going to sell to Walmart or wherever. Okay, now let's say that you were smart and you have this agreement in place with the supplier and they promise, we will never sell your product to anywhere else. Okay, how do you monitor and make sure that they're being honest? And this doesn't cost a lot. First, find out which trade shows they're going to. Not just this one, but the domestic trade shows in the China market. You or a friend or someone you trust, go visit those trade shows, and if you see your product for sale at their trade booth, that's a big red flag. And so often it's because within the Chinese company, the owner signed that agreement with you. Mr. Buyer, I promise I won't copy your idea, I won't sell it to anybody else. But there's so many people with different agendas in the factory. Maybe the salesperson isn't privy to that agreement. Maybe the engineer is so excited they made this great product for their European customer, he wants to show it to everybody, so he makes sure it goes to the trade show. So, even if the boss signed off that this non-compete issue, it's hard to enforce it without monitoring. Okay, where else should you look? When you're visiting the factory, go to their sample room. Go to their tooling room if you're making something of metal fabrication. And especially go to the warehouse, because you will see, let me explain it this way. Just about everybody that buys from China in bulk has the supplier write the name of your brand, your website, your factory on the master packs. Now, if you're walking around your supplier's warehouse, you can see who he's shipping to. Now, he probably doesn't want you walking around taking pictures, so what I do is I make a cover story. Okay, I'm going to do some testing. I want to make sure that your cardboard is strong when it gets wet, it doesn't melt. Or I want to do a drop test to make sure that this cardboard box can withstand a 1 meter drop. In reality, what I'm doing is I'm standing there and measuring things, dropping things, but my coworker is taking pictures, and I make sure to get a box from every customer that I can in that factory. And then I go on Google and go online and find out who is my supplier selling to, and it better not be any of my products. Okay, this is really easy to do, and it can be quite effective. Supplier promises, Mike, you're exclusive for America. I won't sell to anybody in the US or Canada. Okay, it's a deal, thanks. How do I monitor that? I have a friend of mine pretend to be another company, waits a couple months, calls that same factory up and says, hey, I'm thinking about ordering this product. Will you sell to me in America? And if the factory says yes, okay, they're not respecting my contract. So you can use a dummy customer to find out if the seller is respecting your intellectual property. Finally, if you do discover non-compliance with either intellectual property rights or contractual obligations about non-compete, non-disclosure, don't just say, oh, China's so far away, lawyers are too expensive, and I'll never win in a Chinese court. That's the mentality of like 10, 20 years ago. Now demand letters are very effective in China. I use them all the time. Many of the suppliers just don't think that foreign buyers are smart enough to realize that you can hire a Chinese lawyer for hundreds of dollars, not thousands of dollars, to do a case review and issue a demand letter and take the supplier to court if there's clear evidence that they broke the contract. So, litigation, demand letter is very affordable. Investigation gets a little bit harder, but still it's affordable compared to America. Sorry, there's a terrible echo on here. I hope it's you don't hear it. Okay, I get asked all the time, Mike, what does labor cost in China? How much does it cost if I want to have an office worker in an office in China working on my supply chain? So I put together some figures for you. Just the labor rate, not manufacturing, but just 2 hands per hour in a place like California, almost $40. 2 hands per hour in Shenzhen, the minimum wage is $2.29. So yes, you hear in the media about how the minimum wage in China has gone up 15% 6 years in a row. It's true. I have a couple of hundred employees, and I'm paying them a lot more now than I was 6 years ago. But it started so low that even after 15%, $2.29 versus $40. So China's still affordable, but it has gotten more expensive. But everything's relative. Okay, I was doing some research online, and from the National Association of Purchasing Managers and then verified by the US Census, the average purchasing manager's salary in the US is $90,000. They may not even speak Chinese, but they're going to have a college degree and have sourcing experience, and then you have to fly them back and forth to China. So, for the same amount of money, you can engage an entire team. And let me show you a breakdown of some typical office staff. So this is kind of small, and if you leave your business card, I'll send it to you. So we got factory staff over here, and it comes all-inclusive, overtime, month 13 salary, dormitory, meal allowances, everything that by law and by practice you have to provide to your employees. It's still, minimum wage comes in at just over 3,000 RMB per month, all inclusive. Now for someone that's just out of school, maybe speaks a little bit of English, but less than 2 years experience, 4,500 RMB per month. Someone, I call them a level 5, with a lot of experience, maybe an engineering degree, 5 years bilingual, still $9,500. That's less than 2,000 US per month for someone that's highly qualified. So I'm sharing these figures with you so you can help understand what does it cost to manage a project in China and assemble a team. Okay, I was asked to talk a little bit about the RMB, the renminbi, the Chinese currency, also known as Chinese yuan. Your suppliers, their internal costs are in RMB. So when they quote you US dollars, they're making an estimate. Let me take a step back. A few years ago, the US dollar and the RMB were delinked, but the RMB doesn't float. It floats a little bit within a band. It's not a free float. So over time, your suppliers can see what is the worst case scenario that if every day these little floats added up. So you place a purchase order today, but the goods are going to ship in 2 months from now. That means over the course of those 2 months, the RMB and US dollar exchange rate, it's going to change a little bit. So when the supplier quotes you in US dollars, they're looking at how much change, what's the worst case scenario, and that's the quote that they're going to give you. So I've been able to negotiate sometimes 5, one time as high as 7% discount when I said to the supplier, hey, your costs are in RMB, you no need to quote me in US dollars, I'll pay you in RMB and I'll accept the exchange rate risk. But it's kind of like a one-way hedge, because now, I have an office in Hong Kong, but even if you have, I think in Canada, not yet in America, but London, Australia for sure, you can open an RMB account back home. So it's a one-way hedge. You can take your local currency, convert it into RMB, and that way you know that in 3 months, when I have to pay the supplier, you don't have to worry about what is the exchange rate with the US dollar, and the supplier is going to be happy to get RMB. Okay, so check with your bank back home if you can hold a bank account using RMB back home. This is one of the advantages of having a Hong Kong company, is that it's very flexible with the currencies. Okay, so when I got into the sourcing business, it was great. The dollar was pegged at $1 US 8.26. And it was like, for the first 10 years of my career, it was so easy. And then one day, the currency was delinked, and it went all the way down to 6.1. Now it's starting to come back up, the US dollar against the RMB, it's at 6.5. Who knows where it'll be next month, but it is controlled by the government, and the organizers asked me a different question. They said, Mike, where do you think the RMB is going? I'm not a speculator if I had a crystal ball, but it seems that when the RMB gets as low as, as strong as 6.1, that really affects exports, and it may have a negative impact on the overall economy. And so 6.5, it just kind of feels right. So I would be surprised, especially in this economy, if it deviates too much. Well, come back next year and see if I was right. Okay, I was asked to talk a little bit about global tax planning, and this is in the big picture. The beauty of having a Hong Kong company is that if your business is transacted outside of Hong Kong, it's tax-free. Now, if you have a Hong Kong customer and you're buying from China and selling to a Hong Kong customer, that's not offshoring. If you have a Hong Kong company, you're buying from a Chinese factory and you're shipping it to a US customer, you don't have to pay profits tax in Hong Kong. That's why these buildings are so beautiful, and there's an office in every little cubbyhole in Hong Kong is an office. It's because of taking advantage of offshoring. So that's from a Hong Kong perspective. But if you're thinking about setting up a Hong Kong company to reduce your global tax exposure, it's not just a Hong Kong issue. You really need to ask your home country, how does your tax authority back home where you reside view you having a foreign company? So for example, if you're American, the tax man wants to get his money regardless of where you live and where the company's set up. But other jurisdictions, South America, UK, for Europe, they might be more flexible. So the questions to ask your tax person back home is, if I set up a company in Hong Kong and I'm enjoying the benefits of offshoring in Hong Kong, how do I repatriate the money back to my home country, UK or wherever? Will I have to pay a lot of tax then? Is there an advantage for me to set up a Hong Kong company? The American tax attorney might say, no, not really. But who knows what the Argentina or Brazilian government may say. So ask your tax attorney back home, is there an advantage for me if I have an offshore holding company? And even if you're from America, maybe you can't avoid lots of taxes, but you can defer taxes. What I mean is, you're buying from China, you've got your Hong Kong company, and then you're selling on to your US company. Well, in the past, you would buy it for $1, sell it to your American company for $10, and you're taxed on the $9 in America, to make things simple. Now you set up that Hong Kong company, you buy it for $1, you sell it to yourself in Hong Kong for $9, and then you sell it from Hong Kong to the US for $10. In the US, you're taxed on the $1. Now, you've got this pile of money building up in Hong Kong. You can't just put it on a suitcase and take it on a flight. At some point, you're going to need to pay yourself a dividend, or you're going to need to use it to buy a house in America or wherever, and then you're going to pay tax. I'm not saying you should try to break any rules or break any laws, but while that pile of money is taxed sitting there in Hong Kong, instead of sending it back to the US, you use that money, untaxed, to buy the next order in China, and the next order, and it just kind of, this pile gets bigger and bigger, and you're deferring tax. So this is nothing new, and it's 100% legal, but you want to be aware of this if your business is growing. At what point do you need to start thinking about setting up a Hong Kong company? If your orders are hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, it's not worth the headache. If your orders are millions of dollars per year, you're probably crazy not to have a Hong Kong holdings company set up. And there's also, I don't want to be a salesman, but there are partners that you can work with that have Hong Kong holding companies already that you can use to literally have a virtual Hong Kong office. I'm sorry, there's a terrible echo on this. It's hard to talk. Okay, now I told you that I wouldn't make a heavy pitch for my company, but I'd like to make a shameless plug for the China Sourcing Academy that I'm associated with. Professor Neil O'Connor is from Australia, but he's been based in Asia for 20 years, and he interviewed 1,500 suppliers. And then I took a book that I wrote called The Essential Reference Guide to China Sourcing, and we converted all of this text material into a 20-hour video course. So if you like some of the topics that we talked about today, know that they're all available at chinasourcingacademy.com. Okay, before we move to question and answer, if you take away just one thing from me babbling on for 45 minutes up here, if there's one thing that you remember, please make sure that when you deal with these suppliers, that the name on the factory business license matches the name on the contract, matches the name on the bank account where you're sending the money. If those three are all linked, you're really protecting yourself. And before you move to Q&A, as promised, I want to just give you some resources. So our booth number is 9D31. If you want to visit about any of these issues, I'll be over there for most of the show. My website is at the top. The law firm that I'm associated with that I use is Asia Bridge. This is my blog for small buyers, and the sourcing service, Supplier Blacklist I told you about in the Academy. So I'll leave those up there, and I did it. We still have 5 more minutes before time's up. Thank you for your patience today. Once again, leave your business card, and I'll send you this video and the brochure. I'm sorry, and the PowerPoint presentation. Happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.